People's values are often the result of the ones they were reinforced with. Most parents aren't loving their children for who they are, but loving the idea they have of their child. So instead of teaching their kids and allowing them to come to conclusions on their own, they instead preach to their kids. And any questioning of this objectivism is punished or negatively reinforced. This leads to the child developing a conditional acceptance mindset. They then equate childhood not to becoming themselves loved unconditionally, but to be what authority tells them to be, loved conditionally. This is why I scrutinize the belief in children are dumber less component than adults, and why so often people say things like, "Don't treat me like a child," as a defensive response to criticism. Because what defined their childhood wasn't discovering who they are, but being told exactly who to be. This usually leads to intergenerational transmission, since a family's definition of raising a child is less done out of inquisitive research and personal growth as a parent, but out of the instincts that were shaped by our own relationships to our parents. This can show up in a recurrent, kids grow up to mimic their parents out of indoctrination and fear, not loyalty and understanding, or oscillating children give themselves an identity out of rebellion, not a true self but as a twisted reflection of their own trauma. Then typically indoctrinate their kids the same way they were, because they never grew as an individual from their toxic parental guide, but instead became just as defined by them by embodying their opposites. Because their differing opinions and curiosity were debased, they are taught the way to deal with opposition is by invalidating others' values, due to a fear-induced fight or flight response triggered by the brain when the ego feels threatened. False confidence pretentiousness is the ego's shield from introspection. True confidence doesn't waver and doesn't fear discussion when they're certain in their conviction. Humans ought to realize reflection isn't the opposite of conviction, but the path one must walk to find theirs. Just as shame isn't the cure to pride, but its source, anger isn't the cause by itself, it's the result of fear. So if you're ever angry or scared, look within and ask yourself, why am I angry or scared? Is it because of what's actually happening in the here and now, or a trauma response instilled in me by forces from my past I have yet to face? Because everyone has some sort of trauma, because the scale of what one considers traumatic depends on a scale determined by the amount and levels of adversity one faced. Which is why, for many, especially those with white-collar childhoods, their parents shun them for thinking differently, so that then conditions them that thinking differently is bad. Which leads to outliers, like those with disabilities or mental issues, to suffer discrimination judged by how they were born different, not on any actual merits of their actions. Because most parents, traditional or not, aren't raising a human, they're raising a mini-me. And how can one expect their child to grow to be better than they are if they don't allow their children to form their own and new ideals? Plus, on average, the majority of children are extremely adept at divergent and imaginative thinking. In contrast to adults, whom only a tiny minority can even come close to most children's due to indoctrinated beliefs and preconceived notions. So if you give your kids the resources with none of the biases, pure facts like, or all the biases, both sides of argument, then once they give feedback, you can give your thoughts, but do so with humility, treating your child with equal dignity. Regardless of lacking responsibility, will make them feel respected and respect you. They are actually more than likely than most adults to come up with innovative answers, and this encourages them to form an identity true to them and separate from the parent, a bond built on mutual appreciation of each other and their intelligence, not off conditional affirmations and insecurity. Carl Jung theorized that what traits disgust people the most are the parts of themselves they feel they've moved beyond. So a once traditional, now progressivist, is going to disown tradition because they've deemed it unimportant to them because they either unconsciously distance, fear, envy, or refuse to acknowledge them. But this is no different from the oscillating dynamic of trauma discussed before, because the individual hasn't moved past that side of themselves, merely suppressed it. Realization of one's shadow is the first step in self-actualization and authenticity. Because as much as humans like to convince ourselves our opposition must be dumb not to see things our way, this is just the ego trying to protect itself from the truth. That most people are comparable in ability to understand. What truly defines wisdom is skepticism and the ability to reflect on even the most deep-seated beliefs, to evaluate if there's any validity to them. Because core beliefs are core to a sense of self, and if someone is still believing in Santa at 25, sure, they'll be heartbroken accepting the truth finally, but it is far more useful than living in denial.
Oh man, take heed, what safety midnight's voice indeed. I slept my sleep, from deepest dream I've woken plead. The world is deep, and deeper than the day could read. Deep is its woe, joy, deeper still than grief can be. Woe safe, deep, profound eternity.